Dina is in Cheltenham. Dina, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say that America has proven that they value Netanyahu's opinion and his desire to, for want of a better term, Israel to defend itself when it's not actually defending itself. There's a growing amount of Palestinians, Lebanese, British, Americans who see Netanyahu for what he is. He has no plan for peace at all with Palestinians. Look at the number of innocent civilians that have been killed in Gaza and now in Lebanon, women and children. And look at all the charitable organisations and the UN peacekeeping force.
I haven't even mentioned all the aid workers that have been killed at this point.
And
of course,
the aid workers as well. At what point are we going to allow Netanyahu use this line that Israel has the right to defend themselves?
I don't know how you stop him from doing it. There'll be people in my inbox, there's probably people waiting to talk to me who will claim that Israel has the right to continue burning children alive because it is defending itself from Hamas and from Hezbollah. And I suppose intellectually you need to tell them why that's not a valid contribution to the conversation.
I don't think our right-wing media help either.
Well, I'm asking you, how do you tell someone who is going to say that this is an act of self-defense? I mean, I might find it a ridiculous contention, but if we give them benefit of the doubt to somebody making it in good faith, how do you explain? I'm leaving aside the very real possibility of war crimes being committed, which makes a nonsense of the idea that these are sort of inevitable and justifiable acts of, quotes, war, end quotes. But how do you prove to someone insisting this is self-defense that it isn't self-defense? Because I'm not sure you can.
Well, I think you can start by allowing journalists in the area, because Israel, for the last year, have used the line that they wish to protect journalists and that they won't allow them in the area.
Well, they'll take some in. They'll take patsies in who will write propaganda for Israel. They can go in, they can accompany the IDF. But you know, the best foreign correspondents in the world, or the English-speaking world, whether it is Christine Amanpour at CNN or Matt Fry of Channel 4 and LBC fame, whether it's Lise Doucette or whether it's, I don't think Kate Adie's in the game anymore, but they live to report on situations like this because, of course, the truth is a sanitising light, and they are being denied access. David is in Swindon. David, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say Israel is unstoppable at the moment. They're like a rabid dog. And to my view, the only way to stop them would be to have severe sanctions. Now, we all know the United Nations is useless. They've got so many sanctions against them. International Criminal Court. And the Israeli spokesman, I think it's David Mensa, right. Whenever he's interviewed, he says, oh, yeah, proportionality, and we've got the lowest kill rate. You know, the ratio of civilian to military is the lowest in any any war that's taken place. They will not listen.
But they can't. You can't take both of these calls in because you can't say that unless you let foreign journalists in to clarify exactly. and report upon the reality. Yeah. I'm entirely comfortable joining these particular dots together, but another reason why you don't let foreign journalists in is so that you can continue claiming that you're somehow exercising discretion or that you are not committing war crimes. Otherwise, you let the journalists in yesterday.
That's right. Like you were saying earlier, there are no universities, no hospitals, no schools, desalination. It's just unbelievable that the United Nations and America supports them. Now, I'm going to sound harsh now.
Okay.
I really think that Iran will hit Israel, and they'll hit them hard.
Well, God forbid. What would that achieve? And also, I hope you're in the same category as me, but I don't want any Israeli civilians to suffer any more than I want Lebanese or Palestinian or Gazan civilians to suffer. So I don't know what that would achieve.
Okay, all right then. What about sanctions then? Let's stop oil import. Let's stop oil exports to Israel. Let's stop buying Israeli products. perhaps Iran, okay, they won't bomb it. What about if Iran have already did it a few years ago? Seal off the Straits of Hormuz. So the world's supply of oil.
What did Thatcher do after the last invasion of Lebanon? I'm pretty sure she went much further than Joe Biden or Keir Starmer have gone. But of course, and I can hear the desperation in your voice, the search for something that might stay the hand of Benjamin Netanyahu. But I think you began by essentially acknowledging that nothing can and nothing will. So you sort of scrabble around. And remember, Donald Trump could be back in the White House early next year, in which case the idea of any American pause or any American-inspired call for compassion, call for peace, introduction of compunction, that goes out the window in a moment. David, thank you. It's 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The question is hideously straightforward, hideously simple, and strangely unifying, because whether you are on board with Benjamin Netanyahu's abominable behaviour or whether you are passionately opposed to it or whether you're ambivalent, I don't know that anyone can now disagree with the conclusion that he's going to do whatever the hell he wants, regardless of international peacekeeping forces, regardless of international law and regardless of international condemnation. So at least we can all agree about that, right? Naz is in Enfield. Naz, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I've phoned you several times. Thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
How long is the world going to watch on, James? We've been through. I studied World War II, and we said never again. How long is the world just going to watch? We know of people, families, who've watched their family die on video. Innocent children, women, children, innocent workers like doctors. They're
120 journalists, aid workers, but Israel has a right to defend itself, Naz.
No, Israel has a right to defend itself. So does the United Kingdom. Did the United Kingdom bomb Ireland when the IRA came? Did they?
No, I mean there was no campaign of bombing civilian areas in the hope of catching some terrorists. They did undertake some pretty hideous policies, both covertly and overtly, but no, of course not. You know the answer to that question.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. But I've been saying, I've phoned you so many times. We know of women that have been raped by IDF soldiers. Nothing gets through. On the Western media, unfortunately, now that things are slipping through a bit, but it's always Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel.
How do you counter that point, though?
Say, look, all these people.
Where is the limit of defence? What do you say? Yes, I know this, but what do you say to somebody who still clings to the self-defence argument? How do you prove to them that we have gone, or Israel has gone beyond that point?
I think. I'm a part of a Jewish Muslim women's campaign. We try to talk about peace, and what we say is, like, as mothers, seeing babies, seeing videos, it has to stop, James. Not everybody, as you said, not everybody in Israel supports the government. Not everybody, but enough support the government. The settlers are violent towards all the people in the West Bank, and that's only been recently shown. They say Arabs are animals. All Arabs are animals. They teach their children that all Arabs are animals. They're not human. And Benjamin Netanyahu just wants the greater Israel, Judea, Samaria.
I've seen all. I mean, listen. This isn't. I've asked you. I've tried. I know everyone's very emotional today, but I have tried to ask you questions, and you have gone off on slight tangents, Naz. I mean, that because it's an impossible question to answer, I presume for you is how do you prove to somebody that this has gone way beyond self-defense? And I think we're all familiar with rhetoric in the Middle East that portrays Jewish people in a hideous fashion as well. We've seen evidence of that. So, however, the point that you make about sexual abuse and rape, the United Nations has. I think it was in February of this year. The United Nations did make that point as well. Although some people won't like you making it. That's the problem, isn't it? Is that you can tell from my voice, I'm as uncomfortable with rhetorical fire in one direction as I am with rhetorical fire in the other direction. And yet some people, many people, and you may even be one of them, many people struggle now to see it through two lenses, to see it as a conflict with, if you like, two sides. Sam, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James. It's a very kind of atrocious what's happening in the Middle East. It's just I wanted to highlight, have you ever seen a documentary by the name of Tantora? It's the village in
I'm just going to steer you to the conversation that everybody else has been having since 10 o'clock this morning. So have we reached a point where everybody accepts Benjamin Netanyahu is just going to carry on doing whatever he wants, regardless of whether you are broadly supportive of the continuing carnage or repulsed by it?
Of course. And
we have reached that point.
Sorry, what was the question again? Sorry.
Well, I've been asking it since 10 o'clock this morning.
Yeah. So in terms of, no, there's not going to be a limit. I think it's going to continue. It's only going to get worse. It's only going to escalate. And if you look at the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from the 48, and the reason I referenced Tantora documentaries, if you watch the documentary, there's a testimony there where a child is thrown into a burning oven, a Palestinian Arab child is thrown into a burning oven. So it's no surprise that we watched the horrific scenes last night, and it's just a global it's essentially it's what we've seen on the news the last hours, the desensitization, but we've only seen it for the last year because of what happened on October 7th. What we don't talk about, the preceding events of the Deir Yassin massacre, Sharab Shatila massacre. What we don't talk about is the border wall opine from the ICJ. We don't talk about the July 2024 ICJ, which declared Israel as de facto occupier of Gaza, of the West Bank, and apartheid state.
Did it use the phrase apartheid state?
No, so
you shouldn't say that it does. I mean, certainly not if you're coming on to tell us that we're not covering things and then you misrepresent them. So, I mean, I've mentioned almost all of the things that you've just referred to in the course of conversations that we've had. But obviously, the conversations that we've had since October the 7th have been determined by the events of October the 7th and the response to it. So always a broader context. But I think what's different today, and the phone-in that everybody else has been having, is about whether or not we have reached a point that is unprecedented, whether or not even in the context of all the history that you mention, mostly accurately, whether or not there is now a sense of some standard having been breached, some milestone having been passed. And it is the idea, I would suggest, that there are forces on the planet capable of winding Benjamin Netanyahu in. And I don't know when it happened to me. I don't know if it has happened to you. But I no longer believe that to be true.
So, and unfortunately, this is not just Netanyahu. This has been the policy of successive governments before Netanyahu. Hence, why I referenced the Tantora documentary.
No, but again, I don't know. I don't want to be at loggerheads with you, but I need to remind you we're talking about the unprecedented nature of what we are seeing now. And it may have been the unwritten policy of an Israeli government, but I would throw back to the last time Israel invaded southern Lebanon and the response of Margaret Thatcher's government is completely at odds with what we're seeing today. I have abandoned the hope/belief that the quotes international community end quotes is capable of staying Israel's hand, and I think you are as well. I don't fully understand why you're trying to overcomplicate the question that everyone else is addressing. You are.
No. I'm just trying to state that UN resolutions, the General Assembly in 1978 said, for example, the right to self-determination, struggle against occupier, and the 2004 border wall conflict, and the most recent one, and the Article 51 on the chart.
Yeah, so the sense that one day that day might come to dawn, or you go back before the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, whatever it would be. I'm trying today, obviously not entirely successfully, to chart and map what is different about today as opposed to everything that has gone before. So the milestone for me is that idea, perhaps hugely naively, of a Western government, the British government, doing essentially now what Margaret Thatcher did in 1982, and having that idea of a White House being able to say, you have to stop now, and Benjamin Netanyahu having to say, yes, okay, I don't want to, but I will. That's gone. United Nations having agency in the region, having the simple expediency of having United Nations personnel on the ground in Lebanon being enough to ensure that Israel won't attack the bits where United Nations personnel are on the ground. You heard it in the news bulletin. He said that he will. So where is the pause? Where is the caution? Where's the compassion? Where's the compunction? There just isn't any.